May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Cornell?
Here.
Trustee Listner?
Here.
Trustee Miller?
Here.
Trustee Mulvaney?
Here.
Trustee Thomas? Here. Trustee Vree? Here.
All right. Our first order of business is the approval of the minutes of the November 16, 2017 Committee of the Whole meeting and Village Board meeting. Does anybody have any comments on either of those minutes? If not, may I have a motion to approve?
I so move.
Second?
May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Cornell?
Yes.
Trustee Listner?
Yes.
Trustee Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney?
Yes.
Trustee Thomas?
Yes.
Trustee Vree?
Yes.
All right, this is the point in the meeting where if there's anybody who wishes to comment on anything that is not going to be on our agenda tonight, they're free to come forward. Is there anybody who wishes to comment? Okay, if not, we had our Committee of the Whole meeting tonight, so I'll give you a report on that. Our discussion at the Committee of the Whole was a discussion of the current status of staff's work on a new ERP system for the village that they're looking into, and the work that they intend to do in terms of moving that project forward over the next 3 or 4 months. And we had a thorough discussion of it, and staff is moving forward to continue working on it in hopes that sometime in the not too far distant future they'll be able to bring a recommendation to the board for what system we should get. That's what we did in the Committee of the Whole. Jonathan, you want to tell us about this month's Finance Committee meeting on Tuesday?
Sure. So we had our meeting on Tuesday. We had our the two subjects that we talk about every finance meeting, the current village financials. It's sort of a continuation of what we've seen all year, where things are generally coming in ahead of expectations, primarily from sales taxes and building permits. The next is the community improvement plan. We've now made that a regular point of discussion for each meeting. We are through what's been a very productive year in terms of a lot of projects. We have one project left, and so we just reviewed that. It's one of the smaller ones. And then finally, we spent the most time on our preliminary budget documents, where we went through our first run at reviewing the budget for fiscal year 2019. We have significant growth expected out of revenues and then significant growth expected out of expenses. And so we spent a lot of time just discussing the accuracy of what we're budgeting, how confident we are in some of those numbers, and areas that we really need to focus on. Expenses continue to be something that we always talk about, and they are growing. The pension expense continues to move higher at a pretty rapid clip. And so it's something that we are quite aware of, and so that was our first sort of run at the budget. And that was the full meeting.
Thank you. Trustee Miller, did the Plan Commission have any meetings?
We did meet only to do a subdivision of one residential lot into 2, and our work on the design guidelines for the business district will resume at our January meeting.
Thank you. Trustee Thomas, did the Golf Committee have a meeting?
We did. We met Monday evening. One of the interesting things is yet another reason why Stella is so good. November, you may recall, started out about the first half of the month with really lousy weather, and most of the courses that we compete with closed. But the second half of November was quite nice, as a result of which we remained open, and we had over 400 rounds being played after November 23rd. So it's very helpful to the bottom line. And as far as the bottom line goes, we exceeded the annual rounds budget by over 2,000 rounds, and the annual revenue budget by over $150,000. We also, this is the time of year when one of the first things we do, and we did it Monday, is go over expected capital improvements and so forth for this next year. One of the reasons why the reputation of this course has continuously risen is precisely because on a yearly basis, we put more and more money into the course to make improvements. And so among the ones we were talking about included, for example, natural area restorations, renovation of some of the bunkers. What happens with bunkers is, you know, you get them all improved and you have to start over again at the beginning, in effect, because you know, they sort of sequence into a not acceptable state. So that's continuing. And we believe we have a chance to extend the length of the fifth hole somewhat. I think it's basically buckthorn back there. I knew you loved it, and I knew you were there, and that's why I knew Betsy was going to love this. So if we get rid of some of that buckthorn, we can move the tea back. So
You'll notice Betsy lit up as soon as you said we're getting rid of buckthorn.
And our next Golf Advisory Committee meeting is scheduled for January 29th, and that's it.
To clarify, when you're talking about putting money back in, you're talking about money from operations, not from the village budget.
Correct. One of the things we've been able to do is to, well, we budget fairly aggressively for capital improvements, but all those capital improvements have come out of revenues generated by the course in its operations for any given year.
And the Public Works Department also thanks Stella because her good relationship with the man upstairs, giving us more rounds, also means we have to spend less money on having snow removal and everything during November. So they're thankful to Stella for that help as well. All right, Trustee Mulvaney, tell us about the Sustainability Task Force and its last
Sure.
meeting.
Yep, we had a good meeting on December 6th. We reviewed the year and we are making plans for next year. As we've talked about every month, we have had a list of initiatives that we've evaluated, and some of those projects have been completed, and so we've decided to take on additional initiatives where we had interest and energy. So, for example, in 2018, we will be including in our regular work community solar, stormwater mitigation, water conservation, and the reduction of energy consumption. Those are going to be topics that we're going to pick up in 2018, in addition to continuing some of our other initiatives. We've also got an agreement with the Village Glencoe Anchor for our monthly article, which we will write on a sustainability topic pertaining to Glencoe. We are moving along with our active transportation study. For those who don't know, this is evaluation of Glencoe's roads and sidewalks for safe mobility of non-vehicular mobility. We're updating the website, and we will be launching in January, I think it is, a program which I've talked about before here in these meetings for our commercial district. For businesses that meet some criteria, they can get a sticker, put it on their window to promote their activities to be more sustainable and reduce energy. I'll pass that along if you want. And Phil, I wonder, is now the time to bring up a couple other related topics that I'd like to bring actually and address the board. One is perhaps sounds trivial, but it's leaf blowers. I would suggest that there are many communities who are now banning the use of gasoline leaf blowers. The U.S. EPA has done, believe it or not, extensive studies on the emissions, and for example, an hour of a leaf blower is equivalent to 1,100 miles driven by a 2006 Camry, Toyota Camry. So there's a fair bit of air emissions. They're little two-strokers, so they're not very clean burning, and so there's the emissions from the fuel. There are a lot of pathogens that are made airborne as a result of blowing the material from the surface, and you make a cloud of these pathogens. That's particularly unsafe. I would be concerned also about any of our employees who are doing that. And then, of course, there's a noise issue. So there's quite a few, and there are, by the way, quite a few municipalities who are banning these. We have in Glencoe a restriction of their use. I would like us to consider ideas, or maybe if we could ask the staff to evaluate the phasing out, not immediately, but some logical program to phase out the use of leaf blowers. There are alternative technologies, electric and battery operated, that resolves some of the issues, but not all. My suggestion is an elimination of, or my suggestion is to ask the staff to evaluate the policy around our landscaping equipment, particularly leaf blowers. So that's one thing I ask of us to consider. I don't know what happens next, but if we ask the staff to do that, if you guys agree, or if you want to dialogue on it, or if we just say, yeah, sounds good.
I would think that it would be of value to have the staff look at that and come back to us with an evaluation as what our policy is, what our policy might be, what are the benefits of doing that, so that they can report back to us and we can actually have a meaningful discussion on it. Is that the consensus of the board?
Something, I mean, like at the committee of the whole discussion, and what other communities are doing as well in that report.
And among these staff hints that I get, of course, are that we are non-home rule, and we've been looking at all the things that we can't do as non-home rule. We will have to find out whether or not we could alter our policy to actually ban, as opposed to what we do now to try to regulate tons.
Sure. Of course. That's the point of doing the study, figure out what we can do. If we already have a restriction, tighten the restriction to an hour, a month, or whatever it is, right? The other,
Talking about for like the residents or for just the?
again, there are many different ways communities are doing this. Some do it for the professional landscaping, and some have outright banned them, including their residents. I don't know, I'm not going to suggest here what the right thing to do is, but I think it's worth looking at.
The village currently limits when they can be used during the year. They cannot be used between May 15th and September 15th at all. They are allowed in the spring and fall cleanup times, and so we limit their use. We do get our fair share of complaints year-round, but that's the level of restriction that we have at this point. The only exemption are on the 3 golf courses in the community.
And then the other issue that I'd like to suggest we consider here soon in 2018, and it goes back to some of our discussions in our strategic meetings about, I think we called it something about the continuum of generations, or the idea of having housing stock that can enable and continue to allow multiple generations here in Glencoe. So in speaking with the Historic Preservation Commission, this is something they've been considering for a long time, and I would suggest here that in the past they presented to us singular issues, important issues around single lots, but have not presented any sort of village-wide strategy or overall story about what the housing stock of Glencoe ought to be. I would suggest that we ask of our commission to consider presenting to us at least a framework to move forward so that we can really understand how we want to manage the transition of our housing stock. I simply would like to hear more about the issue. At least the commission members whom I've spoken with have expressed a fair bit of concern. We have some regulations around this. Are they the right ones or not? I don't know. I don't have the answer. But one of the simple questions put forth to me that I think is again, I would ask staff to work with our commission to figure something out. But and how many years would it take at the current rate of tear downs to that we wouldn't have any homes older than 1980, for example, right? So what's that conversion rate? What does it mean to us long term for the livability of Glencoe? I'm not suggesting I'm not trying to offer a righteous here what's right or what's wrong or an aesthetic or anything else, but I think it's important for us as a board to consider that. And I don't think that we have, in the 2 years I've been here, had or heard a thoughtful strategy or goal, and it's happening, I think, at the pace of whatever our current regulations in market are. So I would ask again, the board, that if we think this is important, that we activate our commission and staff to think it through.
It actually involves a number of different policies and approaches. The Historic Preservation Commission, I had asked them to proceed on what they had told us when they were here before, to look at what policies they would recommend in order to maintain more of our historic stock and to allow houses to be rehabbed, and what policies, and to look at that. And they had indicated to me that they expected to be doing that over the next few months. And I assume that staff will work with them on doing that. But it also is a broader question that you've raised, Pete, as to thinking about how long houses would last, a whole bunch of things that are separate and apart from just the historic nature or the mix of maintaining all the different architectural styles and things that we have. And so I would think that in part that falls in the purview of the Plan Commission with respect to what are the regulations of what you can build, do, change, as to the residential as opposed to the downtown part. And so we should be considering whether or not to give a project along those lines to the Plan Commission, plus the staff. There are many aspects of that with records and things that they have that maybe warrant their looking at and then figuring out what to report on. So I would think that if the board is interested and wants us to pursue those things, that we might ask staff to take a look at which of our commissions should look at what aspects and what things they should be doing in conjunction with that to fill in gaps and to be part of that.
I would also, oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I would also suggest we're doing a plan of reviewing all the building permits and the fees associated with them. And so whether we can, if there's needs for incentives or desires around a way to handle the age of the housing stock and maintaining it and upkeeping it, whether building permits would fit into it.
One question I have, Mr. President, relative to your direction is, would the board find value in a more structured conversation perhaps between the Historic Preservation Commission and what they have in mind, or at least have a written report before staff tries to
Yes.
pull this together?
This is too, in my opinion, too amorphous for staff to just jump in and spend a whole bunch of time until we have some idea of what it is that we want to do. I think everyone kind of agrees we like the older housing stock. I know I live in an old house, others here do as well. But what specifically do we want for tasking a whole bunch of people, spending a whole bunch of time on something that's not clear?
Well, the other thing I think Pete mentioned, which I think is important, maybe because I'm about at that age of time of life where it becomes more important, is the housing stock we have for getting the aid is getting more and more expensive. And one of the limited about what to do about some of that, but I remember when we moved here, there really was a pretty broad spectrum of what you might call starter houses, houses on up. That's diminished. At the other end, it's more and more difficult to find what I would call empty nester housing anywhere in Glencoe. And historically, Glencoe has been a fairly unique community, I think, for a suburb, in having several generations of a family living in Glencoe. But that becomes less and less possible if there's more options both at the front end and at the back end for people. So I think that's one of the things that needs to be looked into.
Yeah, I would be in favor of having those discussions, and they each seem to me to be substantial discussions with possibly some relationship to each other, but not necessarily. And in order to protect our staff time, I think it would make sense, maybe to have a discussion at a committee of the whole and kind of see, I mean, with whatever input we can get, maybe from the Historical Society, because it sounds like they've at least thought about this. And then figure out what direction we'd like to go in, and then we can give staff more specific direction. I think it's an important topic, and it was raised in connection with our strategic planning, all the material we had, and I think it would be forward-thinking of this village to think about housing stock in all of these manifestations.
And we've had a number of developers come and talk to us because our current zoning and laws don't facilitate the production of empty nester housing or elderly type housing, and there's a whole aspect of that and where it would go and what it would do that normally would fit into the purview of the Plan Commission's discussion of changes as they update the 20-year plan in residential housing. So there are many aspects of it, and so I think it would be very useful if the staff thought about how they all fit together, and not that they launch into a major attempt to do planning and that, but think about how they fit together, whose purview each of them fit in, and have a discussion with us at a committee of the whole where we can take the time to actually sit and think about what we do want staff to look at and where we do want recommendations to come from. So if that makes sense to you, I would ask staff to think about what they should present to us to consider, and so that we can know how to go forward.
We can certainly begin that process, and certainly we've got staff liaisons with all of these commissions that we've mentioned tonight. I still am a little bit unclear as to whether the Historic Preservation Commission has a set of recommendations that it wants to make, and if that is something that we're being asked to vet before it comes to the board, or if it's a little bit more amorphous than that, and we just need to spend some time at the staff level talking with the commissions to understand. I'm not sure what communication.
Sure. So I think the Historic Preservation does have specific ideas, and I think that's one of the elements of this topic. If they're ready, if we could ask them to be ready to present something and get their perspective, I think that's one more input into a wide number of issues that are associated with managing housing stock and thinking about the sustainability of the housing stock.
I would indicate in discussing with the chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission that as of approximately 2 weeks ago, they weren't ready. They were still meeting and discussing what their recommendations might be and where they were. But staff should clarify that.
Why don't we, what staff will do then is we'll assemble information at a high level, perhaps engage with the leadership in the Historic Preservation Commission. Certainly we can speak with the chair of the Plan Commission and talk a bit about some of this, and then bring back a high-level findings back to the board, and then the board can offer further direction at that point.
Thank you. Thanks for considering, and thanks fellow board members for doing that. And thanks staff for finding time to think it through. So to wrap up the task force report here on sustainability, two quick things I forgot to mention. One of the residents actually brought me an article in the Wall Street Journal from last week about leaf blowers, believe it or not, leaf blowers, pollution, and municipalities who are banning them. They brought that to me not knowing that I was planning on raising this, so it was purely coincidental evidence. The last thing I'll say is we have a task force meeting coming up January 23rd. The public is always welcome. We have good dialogue. We always want input, and anything you want to bring to the table is great. Any energy you can bring to help us move our initiatives is also great, so please come, and sometimes we have food.
It's intermittent reinforcement or something like that?
Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Well, that was lively and a bigger report than normal from our Sustainability Task Force. Trustee Listener, do you have anything you want to report on the Sesqua Centennial Planning Commission?
Well, I know that that's one of the topics that's on the agenda too, so we're going to have a report on that, so I almost think...
Well, it's just a proclamation, so you can certainly report otherwise.
Oh, okay, so you're doing...
Not just a proclamation,
No,
but...
no. So yes, we have generally been meeting twice a month, though we actually didn't meet last week. We're a year away from the beginning of our 150th anniversary celebration for Glencoe, and so we are busy at work. We are going to be having a meeting in January where we're going to be putting together representatives from all the various organizations in Glencoe that we're looking to help us in the planning and participation for all the different activities that we're going to be doing during 2019 in honor of Glencoe's 150th anniversary.
Thank you. All right. Could I have the village manager's report, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. We have a few
And
things.
We have a lot of protection tonight.
We do. We have a few things to get through this evening, the first of which is always an enjoyable part of these meetings. In a few minutes, I will be administering the oath of office to 3 of our newest members of the public safety team, but before I do that, I'd like to have Public Safety Director Carrie Lewandowski briefly introduce them to the board and to the community.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Mr. President, members of the board, it's my pleasure to introduce and welcome 3 new public safety officers. Immediately to my left is Phil Marino, and we've got Scott Bissonette and Tom Duax. In February 2017, the Public Safety Commission initiated an examination and hiring process for public safety officer. Scott, Phil, and Tom placed at the top of the eligibility list and were hired in August. They attended the Cook County Sheriff's Police Academy and graduated on December 1st. They are now each working different shifts with a veteran officer in the field training program, and we hope to release them to solo patrol in March. Based on what we've seen so far, we fully expect them to continue to develop the skills necessary to become competent and productive members of the department in a very short time. I'd like to share a quick bio for each of them quickly before we administer the oath. Scott is joined tonight by his parents, Jim and Rose, and his brother, Adam. Scott attended the University of Illinois and earned a bachelor's degree in natural resources and environmental science. He also holds a CPR and first aid certification. During the pre-employment testing process, we were struck by Scott's excellent work ethic and his preparation for this career. He possesses a high degree of energy, conscientiousness, and self-discipline, all of which will serve him well as a public safety officer. We believe Scott will be an excellent addition to the department, and we look forward to preparing him for success in all aspects of public safety. Phil has his father, John, with him here tonight. After graduating high school, Phil attended Robert Morris University and the College of DuPage, where he focused on nursing and pre-medicine studies. While conducting his background investigation as we got to know him, Phil's genuine desire to serve the public and protect the public was apparent. He's a bright, articulate, and decisive individual who is very capable of mastering all aspects of the public safety officer position. He's highly motivated, and we believe he will also be an excellent addition to the department. We look forward to preparing him for a long and rewarding career in public safety. Tom is joined tonight by his parents, Danielle and Denise, as well as his girlfriend, Morgan. Tom attended the fire science program at the College of Lake County and earned his associate's degree. He is also certified as an EMT. He's been working full-time as an EMT for the past 5 years. Tom is also a certified firefighter with 1 year of part-time experience. We appreciate Tom's clear, concise, and articulate communication skills. His public safety orientation fits the service model in Glencoe. We expect Tom to be an active and productive officer and a fine representative of the department. Scott, Phil, and Tom will be taking the public safety officer oath of office this evening to fill the vacancies created by recent retirements and promotions in accordance with the approved staffing level of 36 sworn officers. Congratulations to each of you and welcome to Glencoe. Mr. Crowley will now administer the oath. And I'll make it easy for you. I'll give you a script too. Oh, I forgot yours though. There you go.
We're going to do this all together. If you would, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Scott Bissonette,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the ordinances of the Village of Glencoe,
and the ordinances of the Village of Glencoe,
and that I will faithfully discharge and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the position of public safety officer
the duties of the position of public safety officer
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Welcome aboard.
I don't know why everybody leaves after that. Every time, I'm not sure why. We do
Put
welcome.
it at the end of the meeting.
That's right. We do welcome our 3 newest officers, and I'm pleased to have them join our team. They are all, as Director Lewandowski articulated very well, well-suited for the community, so we're excited to welcome them. As we say hello, we also say goodbye from time to time, and we'd like to acknowledge retiring staff member. Jerry Rosenthal has served the village's Public Works Department for 36 years, and tomorrow, December 22nd, will be his last day before he starts a much-deserved retirement. I've asked Dave Mao to come up and say a couple of things about Jerry, and maybe he can bring Jerry with him.
Well, we do things a little bit backwards on the public works side. We wait till they've served 36 years and then we acknowledge employees. Standing with me tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing to you Jerome Jerry Rosie Rosenthal, as he's affectionately known by most of the employee workforce. Jerry came to the village in 1981 after graduating from Maine East High School and SIU, and a short stint in the private sector in the tree trimming area. Jerry has been a model public works employee for that whole tenure of time, serving in just about every area, every division of our workforce. Primarily the last 20 years in our water distribution division, where while we don't keep such records, I think it's safe to say Jerry's been involved in thousands of water main break repairs in his career.
Put it in the budget, need some water.
During that time, Jerry has been a leader and a peer mentor within our department, and has always carried himself with the utmost professionalism. Extremely dependable and loyal. The first one to volunteer when a volunteer list goes up for after-hour emergency repair work, and so it's appropriate on a night that we welcome 3 new employees that we acknowledge and honor Jerry on his penultimate day of employment with the village. Tomorrow we're going to have a time of sharing and some fellowship with his employees, but we thought it'd be appropriate tonight for you to get to say goodbye as a board to Jerry Rosenthal. So, Jerry, thank you. I told Jerry he did not have to speak, so I think he's going to let his years of service speak for themselves.
The one thing I'd add to all of the wonderful things that Dave has said, and I agree with every one of them, is that Jerry's smile is one that will light up the room, and I've always deeply appreciated just how happy you are. And you've got a heart as big as this building. Thank you for 36 years of dedication, and we're going to miss you. We really are. Thank you.
Family. We've been here a long time, and we've become family.
That's true.
So, thank you very much. I appreciate it all. And good luck and be safe.
Continuing along, I'd like to welcome Betsy Leapson, the founder and president of the Friends of the Green Bay Trail, to tonight's meeting. She is going to be reporting on a long process that has included a coordinated effort between the Village Park District and the Friends, and advising the village board of a set of ambitious plans intended to commence later this winter on a section of the Green Bay Trail between South Avenue, south to the Glencoe Community Garden, encompassing parts of Shelton Park, and that includes removal of invasives such as buckthorn, which we mentioned before, and replace those with several different types of native planting. So I know, Betsy, you've got a presentation for the board tonight, and turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and you know, I've got all these lights on because we just had a community event, our winter solstice celebration, shortest day of the year. And so we had about 60 residents from the community out there to celebrate with us and sing songs and drink hot cocoa, and it was a lot of fun. So, and also thank you, Adam, for helping me out with this. It's much better. As many of you know, we've been working on the Green Bay Trail for some time, and we're very excited about the next phase, which, as Phil said, will be from the community garden up to South Avenue. My slide. Can I have the next slide, please? Great. So for those of you who don't know us well, the Friends of the Green Bay Trail, our mission is to create and maintain a healthy habitat along the Green Bay Trail. We've been doing this since 2010. We are a 501c3 tax-exempt organization. It takes some money to do this, and we're very fortunate to live in an area that has some very generous residents who've made many contributions for our work, and we've also gotten a few grants and funds from foundations. We have monthly board meetings. Everyone's welcome to come to our board meeting, and if you people are just curious and want to take a little look, we have a website, gbtrail.org, as well as a Facebook page. Next slide, please. So this is the important slide to me, because this talks about what's happened over those 7 years. We haven't counted every hour possible, but to the best of our knowledge, we have donated 14,500 hours of work since we started. And the next thing is a little tricky. How much is that worth? What is that worth? I called it worth about $55 an hour. That's the amount that we pay our contractor, our restoration contractor, to do the maintenance work on the trail. It's not their guy who makes the plans, it's the worker bees. Because some of those hours are for that kind of work, other of our hours are for this kind of work, and doing planning fundraising and things like that. So it's kind of a hard number to come up with, but I thought that was the fairest number to come up with. So that's time. Money, we've spent a little over $100,000 on the part of the trail between Harbor and Scott. We still have a little bit more money there to spend. We're probably about 75% of the way done. We've also added back over 500 native trees and shrubs. The village has added an additional 130. Future investment. We're looking, we're going to send out a request for proposal, and we're also getting a lot of help from you guys as well as the Park District. But we're estimating that the expense will be about $100,000 that we will fund on the area between the community garden and South Avenue. And an important part, some people think, oh, well, one of two things. Either you put native plants in, so you're done, right? No, you're not done. As someone was talking about, at the golf course, they're native plants, but there's a lot of invasive stuff that keeps coming back. So it takes stewardship or landscape maintenance, and you have to plan for that. And we have planned for that. We have a stewardship fund where we're investing in Vanguard to help offset some of the cost of future stewardship events. Next slide. Okay, so this is the before and after. I think a lot of you are pretty familiar with this. The before is actually the summer of what the trail looks like currently between the community garden and South Avenue. That's where that before picture was taken. The after is between Harbor and Scott, where we've been working. So a big difference. One of the big things that I want to impress upon you is that as we've met with different groups throughout the community, we've had people actually tell us, and I had never thought this myself, but people actually tell us that they had not gone down to the Green Bay Trail for decades because they were uncomfortable walking on a path by themselves when it was so closed in and so dark, they didn't really feel safe. And so there's some people that are now down on the trail that haven't been down on the trail in a long time. Happy to report. Next slide, please. Okay, invasive plant 101. Poisonous buckthorn. For those of you who don't know, it is a restricted plant, not only on the plant lists of many of the states surrounding our state and our state, but many other states. It's in every state in the country. It produces a chemical compound that actually goes into the soil that prevents other native trees like oak trees and other wildflowers from growing. And I know that probably a lot of you have heard that, you know, our insect population is down like 76%, people are saying, and things like that. And a lot of that is driven by the lack of native plants, a lack of habitat for those insects. And that's important because they're just part of the food chain that we depend on. We're way up the chain, but if we keep ignoring the things way at the bottom of the chain, we're not going to be happy. So buckthorn is a bad thing. It also puts that chemical into, whether it's a pond or a puddle along the way, and that chemical actually causes tadpoles, salamanders, insect-eating frogs to die. So the Lincoln Park Zoo actually did that study. It also contributes to soil erosion because it prevents the other native things from germinating. And so if nothing can germinate under that thicket of buckthorn, you're left with bare ground. And as you guys know, if you have bare ground, particularly in a place where there's a slope, like in the ravines, you get erosion. So it's really not so much the trees and the shrubs that can help prevent erosion, it's all that other stuff that grows on the forest floor. So those are some of the reasons that buckthorn is really bad. Next slide, please. Okay, this is we call it SOSA, and that's south of South Avenue. We don't want to call it Shelton Park anymore because I think the nearby residents, anybody in the community, gets the idea that we're going to be doing something all over the park, and that's not true. We're just looking at the areas immediately adjacent to the trail. It probably won't be a straight boundary on the eastern side. It will be a little curve in there just to make it a little more interesting. Next slide. So these are the current conditions. The slide on the top left and on the right. Bring back my slide to me. There you go. Were actually taken earlier today. And the thing that's important here is that slide that says poison ivy. As you can see, that's, I think, a big cottonwood tree. And there are numerous poison ivy vines growing on that tree, including the one on the far right that's about 4 inches in diameter. There is a ton of poison ivy in this section along the trail, as there is north of Maple Hill as well. So we will be addressing the poison ivy with the help of the Park District and the village when we go through here. You can catch poison ivy, you can catch the rash even in the winter. It's less problematic because of the leaves, but you can still get poison ivy. Next slide. Okay, so this is a little hard to see, especially for you guys in the audience, but what we did is we found a professional landscape architect to help us design a plan to make sure that this area is going to look really good. And so what he did is he took the areas on either side of the trail and divided them into little quadrants that are about 20 by 30. And there's just under 50 little quadrants, so if you look at everything on the left and the right. And so of those, I'm going to call it 50, it's a little under, quadrants, there's 4 different types of quadrants. There's a quadrant for the areas that are really wet. There's quadrants for the areas that are medium wet. And there's one called savanna, which is dry and a little more open. And there's another quadrant called, it's dry back, medium dry front. And that's basically areas where for some reason there's a pile of dirt that's in the back of the pile where when you put water on that, of course the water's going to drain right away and it'll go down to the front, but it's still going to be fairly dry. And the reason those 4 different types of quadrants are important is because we had to look at what types of native plants are going to be happy in each of those types of quadrants. And we're really lucky to have not only this landscape architect, but we also have Bob Kirshner, who's in charge of restoration at the Chicago Botanic Gardens, who has helped us with this plan, as well as Diane Greening, who we're very lucky to have on our board, who's a master naturalist who's worked in the state parks in California. So we were really lucky to have a lot of expertise to help us to try to do this right and make it look really great for the community. Next slide, please. So the next 4 slides, which are the last 4 slides, are just samples of, this is a medium wet area. So this tells you if there was absolutely nothing when we would go in to plant that area, what would we plant? Now, the first thing is, there are some trees we're saving in there. And we're really lucky that one of the Park District employees, Tom McDonald, who's a horticulturist, has been in there beginning to mark some of those trees so they don't get cut down. So there's not going to be a lot of areas where there's nothing. But if there was nothing, we would plant something that would look similar to this. And the evergreens we've changed the evergreen since we picked this one out, is actually going to be the one non-native plant that we will use in this area. We're going to use the emerald green giant arborvitae. Is that right? Green giant, thank you. And the reason that we're going to use this plant is because it's really difficult. There aren't that many really great native evergreens in this area of the country. They're hard to find. And this is the same tree that the Botanic Gardens is using in all their areas. And the reason they're using it is because it provides some screening, good screening. It grows really quickly as long as you water it really well when it's first put in. So we're going to have those interspersed throughout the blocks to provide some shelter, some screening. And you'll notice if you look at the tree, the hardwood tree, that it's got 3 different possibilities of what the hardwood tree could be. And the reason for that, again, is we don't want to have everything look like a cookie cutter. So we want to put some variety and mix some things up so it'll be more interesting and look more natural. Now, the next 3 blocks are kind of the same thing, it's just different areas. Like that. Here's the savanna. Now, this is the one that has that tree. There's a few varieties. I think there's 5 different varieties, and I think there's 6 different shrubs that could be. So there's going to be a lot of different types of plants, which also is a really good idea because we've cut down how many ash trees in the village. Usually when there's some kind of insect like that, they go after one thing. So we're going to have a lot of variety out here because if and when that happens, we're not going to feel like we're going to lose everything. The next 2 blocks, guys, are really, it's fine. It's really the same. It's just a different moisture level in the soil. And so because of the different moisture level on the soil, don't even worry about it. It's the same. It's just a different variety of plant for a different condition. But I think everybody gets kind of the idea here. So if there's any questions or any concerns, I'd sure like to hear you guys talk about them now.
Do we know his name?
Betsy, I have 2 quick comments. One is with the skinny linear landscape that you have, it's difficult to make it not look like a bunch of trees lined up like soldiers. So this idea of clustering, I think, is great. Some open space is great to help break up just like a row of fence posts.
Thank you.
And, and I should say, of course, love what you're doing. The other thing I would suggest is you've put a lot of thought into the plant species.
Mm-hmm.
It would be wonderful to make that public so that others can follow the model on their own properties or properties that they have control of.
Great idea.
So we can advance and promote the right types of trees in the right places as we think about other landscapes.
That's a great idea, and we're going to have this on our website, and I think that it may be on some other websites as well.
Park District and the village will both have it as well.
And I'd even encourage you as part of the sustainability to think about moving our 50-50 parkway sharing to native-only trees.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Totally agree.
Anything else? Any other questions, comments?
We do have a resident with us this evening from the area. Do you wish to speak? Okay.
Okay, great. If you do later, I'm always available. Okay, thank you guys so much, and if anything comes up in the meantime, you know where I live. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy.
On the trail, right? Yeah. Thank you, Betsy, and thanks to the entire Friends board, those members who are here tonight. This really is an example of a tremendous amount of work that has been done, and I think we can all celebrate what the trail has become from Harbor to Scott. It's really an amenity that the community deeply appreciates. I'm excited about what this phase of the project is going to bring. So we thank you for all.
Thank you, Ken. We hear often today about things that are done between private groups and government, and this is a fabulous example of wonderful things that can be accomplished when government and private groups come together to work on important projects, and we are just very fortunate to have the Friends. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of additional items I wanted to make mention of this evening. Just adding briefly to what Trustee Vree already mentioned regarding the fiscal year 2019 budget. The preliminary budget document is currently available on the village's website, and staff will be formally presenting it at the January 18th village board meeting. One note I wanted to make was probably the most significant change being proposed in this budget that impacts our residents is the discussion of a modification of the water rate. The rate increase that was proposed and included in the budget is the result of a significant process of review. We have posted the information about the proposed rate increase on the village's website. Actually, we issued a press release regarding the discussion on Tuesday night earlier today as well. And I know Dan Dorfman is drafting an article about it, so we do encourage any comments from residents to be directed to the village manager's office, and again, that budget presentation will be on January 18th. A few quick holiday announcements. Christmas morning, we will be doing a reveal on Facebook of what our most recent communications effort has borne out, and that is something that the village board has a copy of, an advanced copy of, at each of your spaces. This is the new Glencoe Quarterly, also known now as Inside Glencoe. This is the reimagined community newsletter that now integrates the library as well as the Village Park District, District 35, and Family Service of Glencoe. We're incredibly proud of the work that was done primarily by Megan Hoffman in the village manager's office to make this a reality, but also from each of the organizations. This was a joint effort. I think it's going to surprise some people as to how professional it looks, and we are really thrilled with the outcome of it. So I wanted to make sure to make mention of that. Because if you're following Facebook on Christmas morning, there's going to be a gift to unwrap. You're going to be able to flip through. It's just very cool.
What else could we possibly be doing Christmas morning?
Well, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. I know that's what I'm going to be doing on Christmas morning. Speaking of Christmas and New Year's Day, the Village Hall offices will be closed both Mondays, December 25th and January 1st. As typical, Monday and Tuesday garbage collections will be delayed one day, both of those weeks. And just finally, on behalf of the entire staff, I wish the board and the community a very happy holiday season. And if anyone's traveling, safe travels to you and your families. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
No question, but this looks really good.
That's all her, right over there.
Megan did a fabulous job. All right, our next order of business is a proclamation declaring 2019 as the 150th anniversary of incorporation of the Village of Glencoe and a year of celebration. The proclamation reads, whereas in early 1869, Glencoe was a small community of less than 30 homes, a few local stores, a country school, a church, and a railway station connected by dirt roads and an occasional plank or gravel walk that had first been settled by Anson Taylor and several German and English immigrant families only 30 years earlier. And whereas the village founder, Dr. Alexander Hammond, and his investors from the Glencoe Company gave serious thought and consideration to the development of the community and began a planning process that predates the creation of the first official plan commission in the early 1920s and continues to this very day. And whereas on March 29, 1869, the village was officially incorporated under a special charter granted by an act of the Illinois State Legislature, one of the few things they've done right in the last 150 years. Whereas since that time...
It doesn't say that.
No, okay.
Editorial
Put that in.
It's a hidden whereas.
Yes. Whereas, since that time, the village of Glencoe has become a leader and model for other communities, being one of the first in the nation and the first in the state of Illinois to establish a council-manager form of government in 1914. And whereas, since that time, the village of Glencoe has similarly become a leader and model for other communities in protecting the safety of its residents, from the first constable and magistrates in 1869 and its first motorized fire truck in 1915, to becoming the first municipality in the state of Illinois to combine police and fire protection into a unified Department of Public Safety in 1954. And whereas education has always been a major focus of the community, from the first one-room schoolhouse sponsored by early settlers, through the construction of Central School in the late 1800s, North and South Schools in the 1920s, the West School in the late 1950s, and Glencoe has been a leader not just in its commitment to teaching and administrative excellence, but also as the creator of an innovative plan to place parks next to its schools to enrich both the mental and physical development of its youth. And whereas Glencoe's residential development represents a museum of domestic architectural styles dating from the mid-19th century, including the works of noted American architects William Boynton, Howard Van Dorn Shaw, David Adler, George Fred, William Keck, and George W. Maurer, among others. Renowned landscape architects Jen Jensen and Frederick Law Olmsted, Jr., and most notably, the third largest collection of Frank Lloyd Wright designed structures in the world. And whereas with its wooded bluffs and deep ravines that led early map makers to declare Glencoe as Queen of the Suburbs, the beauty of this community has been preserved through the conservation of Lakefront Park and enhanced over the years with numerous additional parks, the development of the Green Bay Trail, and the establishment of the Chicago Botanic Garden in 1972. And whereas the people who have created, developed, and kept this community vibrant since its incorporation represent a uniquely diverse group of residents from all racial and ethnic backgrounds, from all religious backgrounds, and from all trade and business backgrounds, who have shared at least one common bond, their love of and commitment to the village of Glencoe. And whereas the village of Glencoe will mark its 150th anniversary of its incorporation on March 29th, 2019, now therefore be it resolved that the village president and board of trustees of the village of Glencoe, Illinois, proclaim 2019 a year of celebration in which the 150th anniversary of the community will be celebrated and commemorated through appropriate ceremonies, programs, projects, and events. Further, I, Lawrence R. Levin, do hereby proclaim the creation of a committee to consist of board members, community leaders, and citizens to properly plan and execute this year of celebration. Be it further resolved that the village president and board of trustees of the Village of Glencoe express their gratitude to all the citizens of the Village of Glencoe, past and present, for their continuing contributions and commitments to the rich culture and civic history of Glencoe, and look forward to celebrating that history with all of the residents of Glencoe in 2019. May I have a motion to adopt the proclamation?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
It carries. Okay. The next order of business is the appointment of Julia Eidenman to the Community Relations Forum. Any questions? May I have a motion?
Second?
May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Cornell?
Yes.
Trustee Listner?
Yes.
Trustee Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney? Trustee Thomas? Trustee Vree?
Yes.
The next order of business is the reappointment of Andrew Berlin to the Public Safety Commission. Any questions? May I have a motion?
Second?
Actually, I can do it by
Yeah, we don't
voice
need a roll
vote.
call.
All in favor?
Aye.
That carries. Okay, our next board meeting will be January 18th, 2018. The next order of business is our consent agenda. Are there any questions on anything on the consent agenda? If not, may I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Second?
Roll call, please.
Trustee Cornell?
Yes.
Trustee Listner?
Yes.
Trustee Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney? Trustee Thomas? Trustee Vree?
Yes.
All right, our next order of business is the public hearing and consideration of an ordinance establishing the 2017 tax levy for the Village of Glencoe and the Glencoe Public Library. Could I have Director Clark give us a little discussion and presentation of what's involved with the levy?
Sure, thank you, President Levin. Tonight is the process for conducting the public hearing for any public comment related to the 2017 property tax levy and for consideration and approval of that recommended levy. At the November 16, 2017 meeting, the village board announced this night as the public hearing for the tax levy, and also pursuant to notice published in the Glencoe Anchor on December 7, 2017, again reaffirming the availability of this process for presentation of an opportunity for residents to provide comment or ask questions related to the tax levy. The total 2017 tax levy is a request for $11,987,985 and is an increase of $271,321 or a 2.32% increase from the 2016 tax extension. The total anticipated increase per $100,000 of EAV is $28.70 on the village's portion of the tax bill. This ordinance also provides as a component unit of the village, the library's tax levy also. The library's tax levy is $2,358,984 and is a $62,989 increase or 2.74% from the 2016 extension. Their total increase per $100,000 EAV is $6.66. The actual increases will be subject to, the village as a non-home rule community is subject to the property tax extension limitation law, and the amounts requested will be subject to the county's review and establishing the actual extension amount for the 2017 tax levy. With that, I would entertain any questions that the board may have.
All right, I officially open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to ask any questions or discuss the levy? If not, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Second?
Roll call, please.
Trustee Cornell?
Yes.
Trustee Listner?
Yes.
Trustee Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney?
Yes.
Trustee Thomas? Trustee Vree?
Yes.
All right, may I have a motion to approve an ordinance establishing the 2017 tax levy for the Village of Glencoe and the Glencoe Public Library?
Second?
May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Cornell?
Yes.
Trustee Listner?
Yes.
Trustee Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney?
Yes.
Trustee Thomas?
Yes.
Trustee Vree?
Yes.
Okay, the next order of business is consideration of a resolution adopting the village's anti-harassment policy. We currently have one, of course, but this is to adopt it as an ordinance. Could I have a little discussion from you?
Certainly. Thank you, President Levin, and good evening, members of the board. This evening before you is a resolution to formally adopt the village's anti-harassment policy by resolution. As a bit of background, the village strives to provide a safe, comfortable work environment for all employees. And as a component of that, we've had an anti-harassment policy in place for many years, and we periodically conduct training on that policy. We plan to conduct additional training on that policy early next calendar year. The policy that we have on the books today applies to employees, elected and appointed officials, commissioners. And this evening, part of the reason that we're bringing this policy to you for formal adoption and consideration is the State General Assembly passed a law that requires municipalities to formally adopt a policy prohibiting sexual harassment by either ordinance or resolution. So that is the reason that we're bringing this policy before you this evening. Go to the next slide. Under our current policy and the policy that you have before you, all forms of harassment, including sexual harassment, are strictly prohibited. Our policy sets forth a complaint reporting and investigation process. Our policy prohibits retaliation for making a complaint or participating in an investigation, and it sets forth disciplinary procedures if an employee is found to have violated the policy, and also sets forth that if an elected or appointed official is found to have violated the policy, then appropriate remedial and corrective action will be taken. All of these themes carry through in our policy that's in your packet for consideration this evening. Again, the reason we're bringing it before you is to comply with the new state law that requires formal adoption. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Quick question, do we have training for our staff on the changes, if there are any?
There are no substantive changes to it. There are a few wordsmith nuance changes to track with the state law, but we do cover the policy extensively in training, and we will.
Any other questions or discussion?
Steve, as drafted, this tracks the state law.
Yes, it does.
It was reviewed by your firm.
Yes, it is, and by your Labor Council.
When you
Correct.
say it tracks the state law, is it?
It complies with the 4 specific requirements that the state legislature requires of
So the
municipalities.
specific language in here is not directly dictated by the state law?
No, but the concepts, there's 4 concepts that this policy now complies with. Or does comply with. It always has, but now we've confirmed that it does.
The real difference is before it was a policy, but it wasn't an ordinance. And so now we
It was and it still is not an ordinance. It was a policy. It wasn't officially adopted by the village board. Tonight, if this passes, it will be.
I would add to one of the requirements is that the policy be adopted before January 16th, I believe it is. So it is timely that it's before you this evening.
Any other questions? If not, may I have a motion to adopt the ordinance?
Resolution.
Not the ordinance, excuse me. The resolution that adopts the village's anti-harassment policy.
I so move.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Trustee Cornell?
Yes.
Trustee Listner?
Yes.
Trustee Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney?
Yes.
Trustee Thomas?
Yes.
Trustee Vree?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other business that anybody wishes to raise? If not, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Trustee Cornell?
Yes.
Trustee Listner?
Yes.
Trustee Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney?
Yes.
Trustee Thomas?
Yes.
Trustee Vree?
Yes.
Thank you all.
Not bad.